For my final, I wanted to do a research on the grief and loss among non-human primates. I wanted to see how they were similar to humans, how they were different from humans, behaviorally mainly, but I wanted to see if there are any like rituals or aspects, characteristics that are similar to us, because I really wanted to see if grief is a uniquely human experience. I think it's something we all face, and I wanted to know if we were alone in that or if primates also do that as well. So I will show how various primates grieve the loss of bonded pairs and highlight the ways in which humans and primates are similar, shown in attachments and behaviors. A bit of background about grief and loss within primates is I found this one really cool study from the National Library of Medicine, which is monkeys' response to separation of loss, which had the 6-month-old monkeys be separated from their caregivers or their mothers, and they studied what happened. They found out that there was a initial protest phase, which was like loud calling, searching, agitation, and then that was followed by a despair phase, which was withdrawal, inactivity, and unresponsiveness. They also exhibited physical behaviors such as curling up, lack of play, lowered eye posture, their eyes were closed, and they also had reduced interest in new stimuli as well. However, because of they had these phases and these behavioral changes, they did find out that there was a recovery phase that followed. The social behaviors gradually returned. However, some infants showed emotional detachment from their caregiver even after reunion. So this kind of goes to show that grief and loss has a lasting impact on primates, which kind of brings me to the idea of evolutionary adaptivity in this. Is this something that primates have learned over time and have adapted, or is this something that they're just doing? And I'll see later on in the slides of some primates have shown it for longer periods of times, and some are just now being watched doing it, which I think is interesting. Of maybe there is some evolutionary behaviors happening against primates now. And then I did find this one quote that I thought was very interesting to include. It says, "Grief is a rare emotion that cannot be ethically brought on, controlled, measured, easily categorized. In order to study it, anecdotes must be accepted as carefully documented examples of this rare but important behavior." I just thought that was important to include, because how can you really measure grief and loss in a primate? I feel like with humans you can talk about it, and we will talk about Coco the gorilla, who can talk, but I feel like it's just a very complicated thing, and so I think anecdotes of watching them do things, that's how we can understand what they're going through. So again, I just wanted to bring up the emotional versus adaptational. Is this something that has been learned, passed down, or is it something that they're experiencing, I don't know, through emotions right now? That same study that I talked about the infants being separated from their moms, really helped me understand this. There's a quote in there that says, "While there is not enough data to conclude whether grief is an adaptive trait, it does function and beneficial in most primates." Like I said, it is functional. It's not just an emotional one. It reinforces social bonds, which we'll see through mainly the bonobos example. And it also motivates individuals to stay close to the group, which improves survival in species that rely on cooperation. I also think maybe emotional reactions may help stabilize social hierarchies after death, which is kind of interesting to compare to humans too. I know I've gone through my own grief journey, and I've seen how socially it affects different dynamics and different relationships. So I just thought that was really interesting to include and research on. Okay, to get into the examples that I found in primates experiencing grief and loss, I first thought to talk about Koko the gorilla, who can communicate, understands language. But Koko experienced two different grief and losses that were prominent. She had a kitten called A-Ball, and also she became really close with the comedian and actor Robin Williams. And when she was informed of both of their deaths, she signed words for like sadness and stuff like that. But I'll show a video from a documentary talking about her experience with grief and loss.
One evening, A-Ball was tragically killed on a nearby logging road. Koko was heartbroken.
Koko, A-Ball, hit by a car.
I went in right away and I said, Koko, something's happened to your kitty and he won't be here anymore. You know, the cat has died.
Penny stayed with Koko to comfort her. And later, privately, Koko expressed her grief.
There was also a interesting documentary from BBC about like a dummy spy monkey that they gave to a group of monkeys, and they wanted to see how it was going to interact with it and film their response. So I'll play that video now and we can see how they respond to grief and loss.
But disaster strikes. An injured baby is a cause for concern. And this langur seems to believe she's died. Then, something extraordinary happens. The monkeys gather round the motionless spy creature as if it is a real baby. They react just as they do when their own babies die. A calm and contemplative mood descends on the colony. There's a sense of grief, as well as empathy for one another. Quite accidentally, our spy creature is at the centre of something extraordinary, capturing emotions that have rarely been observed. Such apparent expressions of grief may not be unique to
Chimpanzees were really interesting to research on how they deal with grief and loss. I found lots of examples, and I'll even include a video too. But what I found mostly is that chimpanzees carry their deceased around, and they continue to groom them. So one quote from Science.org said that the mothers carried the infants around on their backs for 68 and 19 days respectively, even as they had dried out and become mummified. They brushed flies away from their babies, groomed them regularly, and allowed chimps, including other young animals, to poke the bodies, lift their limbs, and even carry them around for short distances. On the slide, you can see there's an example of chimps cleaning the teeth of a deceased monkey too. So again, the grooming continues. But there's also like behavioral aspects that happen afterwards too. Jane Goodall was a great example of that. In 1972, she had Flo and Flint, who are a mother and son. They were very closely bonded. And after Flo died, Flint had signs of depression and actually died only a month after his mother passed away too. So I'll show that video of the chimps carrying the dead primate around, and you'll get to see that. But I thought it was very interesting. The grooming kind of reminds me of humans. I know with my mom, we had an open casket, so we had her hairdresser come in and braid her hair for her, and we put makeup on her, and we picked out an outfit. So like, I don't know, that kind of reminds me of that a little bit.
3 individuals present, and in the next 17-18 minutes there are 36, 38 individuals of the 43 individuals actually at least one time visiting the body or staying very close to the body for the full 17 minutes.
We see the chimpanzees coming together in a very small space, gathering around this body. And we haven't seen in any other time that we've been watching these chimps them all gather in such a small space and be so calm and quiet and motivated to stay near each other or near the body. We can't say for sure, but they're grouping together in a way that we've never seen before.
Chimps are seen gently touching the body, smelling, and observing. Many members of the community at the time this video was recorded last fall were suffering from a respiratory ailment, and you can actually hear several chimps coughing. A necropsy determined the 9-year-old died of pneumonia. Within about 2 minutes, a chimpanzee mother, whose infant daughter also died in recent days, is seen carrying her deceased daughter and stopping within a few feet of the dead 9-year-old. This chimp mother, Masia, was the subject of a study released earlier this year in the American Journal of Primatology by the same research team. Video from a previous day shows Masia and another daughter, Mary, inspecting the dead child. They were joined by other chimps.
The bonobos were also very interesting to research as well. I found an article that discussed a group of bonobos and studied the social hierarchies amongst female members, mothers who had lost their infants, and how did that affect social hierarchy relationships, which I thought was interesting, especially thinking about in a human sense too. But I found that there was a bonobo, Pesce, who lost her infant, and her relationship with Azure and Violet, who also had infants of similar ages, weakened. But they found that Azure and Violet's relationship, who they didn't lose their infant, their relationship strengthened after Pesce had lost her infant. So I thought like maybe that's like them thinking about their bond of them watching their, a group of a member of their group grow through something made them maybe more appreciative of each other. I don't know. That's just what I'm thinking. It was also interesting to see the relationship not between females, but also males for Pesce. And I found that the male relationships with Pesce increased afterwards. I think they wanted to have another infant with Pesce. They were very attracted to her and trying to return her fertility, and hoping that maybe if they were around her, then they would be help with her next offspring. The Japanese macaques were observed having grief and loss amongst close pairs. Bonded pairs is what they studied, and they found that some macaques stayed close to the bodies and even groomed them repeatedly, especially when the deceased had been a close social partner. So that loss of a bonded pair had effect on the macaques. Again, the grooming similar to chimpanzees. However, what was different about the macaques is that they had been recorded making specific vocalizations after the death of an infant that were only heard after the death of the infant. I'll again talk about another primate that shows vocalizations, but I think these vocalizations are interesting because it's a somatic relief. I would say similar to like wailing or crying after a loss of a loved one in a human. So the vocalization was also found in marmosets, and marmosets had this vocalization that was like the call of a predator after the loss of their loved one, which I thought was interesting too. But they also experienced grief and loss in terms of their bonded pairs again. There's an example of a male and a female fell out of the tree, and the male engaged in a number of behaviors, including embracing her, sniffing her, chasing other monkeys away, sitting by her, and trying to copulate with her. So this was also interesting to see in marmosets because it hasn't been observed before. This was a study, or it was in a zoo in 2005 that they recognized this. And since in 2025, there has been more instances of this being seen, which I think is interesting to think about the adaptive versus the emotional of is this something that's becoming part of the marmoset's grief process now? Is that something that they have adapted to? After looking at these examples of primates and doing some research, I was really surprised to see that we had more similarities than there were differences. You can see the bonds, it's pair bonding. There's attachments in social hierarchies too, social settings, like with the bonobos. I think it's also pretty human with families too. It changes family dynamics. There's also behavioral changes too, maybe withdrawing antisocial behaviors, and those behaviors return, which I think is interesting because I see that as humans too. Grief is part of our life, but we might take some time to figure it out, but we then return to normal. Not normal, but our social behaviors return. The physical contact for comfort I thought was also interesting. I know that they groom them or carry them around, but I also thought about like an open casket funeral where you touch the person after they're dead, or I thought about instances where people carry around ashes of their loved ones with them. So I think that's also a similarity. And then the vocalizations I thought was interesting. It's not crying when they have their predator calls or their specific vocalizations, but again, it reminded me of that somatic release of it's definitely pent up emotions that you're feeling, that speaking or using your voice sound helps release that. I also found that there are differences too, for sure. Humans have more rituals and symbolism. I think this goes again with the cognitive complexities that are different between humans and primates. It's very layered with grief in the human aspect. There's like Shabbat in the Jewish culture where you sit around for 7 days, and that's a little bit more advanced, I guess I would say, cognitively advanced or cognitively complex. So definitely differences between them, but it was really cool seeing the similarities. Which leads me to my conclusion, is that I found that there were a wide range of ways for primates to respond to grief and loss, but mostly found that humans and primates are very similar. Future research on the cognitive ability to feel emotions in primates could lead to greater development in understanding what is uniquely human and what do we share with our primates and ancestors. And I also included my works cited too.